We're now going to turn back to our panel where we're going to break down countries like Turkey who are working to integrate refugees. Deniz, I would like to start with you. In the piece we just saw, the government has been offering incentives to the Syrian refugees to set up their own businesses. Will that be enough to really integrate 4 million plus refugees living in this country?
It will not be enough in the short run, but in the long run, everybody will benefit. I mean, because compared to the other durable solutions that we have at hand, like return and resettlement, as we just talked about, like they are not working, this is really the only policy that we are left with. And focusing more on these good practices are very important. And also, it will, in like a decade's time, turn Turkey into a different actor in the region as well. Because research shows that the more integrated the migrants and refugees are, the more transnational ties that they have. And crisis in Syria at one time will end. And imagine these entrepreneurs that we just saw. They will not leave their businesses here and go back to Syria, right? They'll probably keep their businesses here and go to Syria, open new shops, open new businesses. And in that sense, Turkey will be holding a very strong diaspora that will turn it into a soft power in the region. So I think in the long run, this is in the benefit of everyone to focus on these.
Yeah. Christina, thank you. On other countries like Germany have had special vocational training programs to train to the jobs many Germans don't want to do for the time being. So how successful have European countries been in integrating refugees to their communities?
I mean, Germany is maybe an example for economic migration and integration of economic migrants, but the problem here is that we cannot make an analogy 100% because the populations are different. In the case of Syrians, we should mention that there's a high number of people who are very well educated. They have graduated from universities. I'm not saying that this is the majority, but there is a very dynamic population that could enter the labor market in Europe, and it could help build up the economies of European states. So the problem here is that we're talking about a big population, so we need to know exactly how they could be absorbed. I'm not so sure if we can say that there is a specific state in Europe that it did this process well, it implemented this process of integration well. For example, in some states, which they don't even talk about, so the discourse is totally away from all this integration process. Integration process should be a dynamic and engaging process between the two communities, between the local communities and between the hosting populations. For example, in Greece, we don't have a policy about this integration, although we have a significant number of people who are residing in the country, who want to get into the labor market, who want to do language courses.
What's the situation in Greece?
Right now, the situation in Greece, I would say that it's pretty bad, especially in the islands. We have specific Greek islands close to the border of Turkey that we have a big confinement of population. There are lots of Syrians, people from Iran, Afghanistan. These are the most popular nationalities. There is an outsourcing, I would say, of responsibilities towards Turkey. But when we are talking about Greece right now, most of them, they are in these islands that I mentioned, and we have small population in the mainland in order to avoid clashes with the local population.
Yeah, the refugee issue has been a sensitive political topic across Europe, and Angela Merkel of Germany risked her political career by welcoming hundreds of thousands of refugees into the country. So can you talk on how the refugee issue is changing the political discourse around Europe, Deniz, and also in other parts of the world?
Well, when we talk about Europe, we shouldn't talk about it as if it's one homogeneous unit, of course. For example, countries like Portugal are doing pretty well in terms of refugee and migrant integration. But then there are also countries like Italy, Hungary, Poland. I mean, the number of refugees that they have accepted in Hungary is like less than 100, if you think about it. So yes, Germany has done a great job in accepting the refugees, but there were also economic reasons for that as well, because the unemployment rate in Germany at that time was rather low, and they needed like some labor in the country. So I think it really matched the needs of Germany. So even in Europe, like the reaction to refugees and migrants are very mixed, and the latest actually parliament elections, European Parliament elections, I think have shown that.
Yeah. So here in Turkey, refugee issue is also being discussed a lot, and opposition parties here have warned that Turkey shouldn't be taking any more refugees. Could you see a change to Turkey's refugee policy in the coming future? And what do you say about that?
I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic. I would like to be more pragmatic and realistic. I don't think that the policy is going to change anytime soon in Turkey and generally speaking around the world. The international framework regarding international protection and refugee status is is there. I mean, we have the laws, we have the regulations, but as you said very well, the issue is very much politicized. So each government, you know, implements its own policies and its own, let's say, regulations in terms of the displaced people. So regarding Turkey, I would say that there was a positive thing, there was a positive issue, the fact that they tried to align their laws and their legal system with the EU acquis and the European asylum system. That was a good point. They have new laws according to European legislation. But when it comes to policies and when it comes to practical implementation, we can see some barriers. So in the Syrian issue, we saw that the governments, the European governments and the Turkish government played around the refugee issue. So refugees and all these vulnerable populations were used for political bargains. So I'm not so sure if the direction is going to be much more humanitarian or in line with international human rights principles.
Okay, Deniz, I know you are critical of Global Compact of Migration Agreement, which was signed in 2018. But as I listen to you, it is the political will that needs to be taken to help reach those refugees around the world. How could this happen?
There were two compacts, one on migration and the other one on refugees. So they divided the issues into two. And there were two views about the compacts. I mean, on the one hand, there were the optimists. They thought that given the populist discourse against migration and refugees all around the world, this shows the great political will of, you know, wanting to do something about the issue. But then there were also pessimists like me, who thought that it was really waste of resources and time for everybody. Because the compact is not really saying anything new. I mean, the compact on refugees. But it is just reiterating the things that we have been saying since the World War II. And the compact on migration, I mean, I'm also critical about that as well, is really putting too much pressure on the shoulders of the migrants to solve the problems of the world.
Okay.
I mean, there are like inequalities in the world, and it's like the migrants should be solving those inequalities through their agency.
Yeah. So the problem here lies with the current system, I understand. Ladies, thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.